They start running ads in newspapers, putting things on bulletin boards around college campuses, that sort of thing. And it just says, pregnant, worried, pregnant, need help, call Jane.
You're listening to The Pelvic Freak Show
with your hosts, Amanda Neary and Hannah Meyer. Hey, Pelvic Freaks. Welcome back to another episode of The Pelvic Freak Show.
Where you're freaks for us and we're freaks for your pelvis, baby.
Hannah and I are so excited because today we have our very first repeat Pelvic Freak guest on the podcast. If you've been listening to our show, you know her and love her, and her first episode with us was an absolute hit. So welcome back, Hannah Linsky.
Hey guys, it's good to be back.
We've got Hannah double trouble today.
Yeah, so if you might get confused a little bit.
I don't think you will because Hannah Meyer's voice is
very distinct.
But Hannah, welcome back. We're so excited to have you. For the Pelvic Freaks that don't know you, because we have more followers than last time you were on, do you want to just give a little brief intro on who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into today's topic?
Yeah, sure. Hi, it's good to be back. I am a predominantly fashion historian and vintage seller and personal stylist. I have a studio here in the city where I style clients, have a little collection where you can shop by appointment, and it's also part dance studio, which is how Hannah and I know each other originally from pole dance.
Yeah, Hannah's my pole partner as well. And soon to be Lyra partner.
Hell yeah.
Because we just took a Lyra class. If you guys know what Lyra is, it's aerial hoop. We're into aerial forms of art and we're just experiencing a new apparatus soon. So, hey, look out for Hannah XXX Hannah Lyra performance.
We're expanding our talents. We got in a little bit of a rut with pole. We're trying new things.
And ruts are okay because it makes you try new things.
Yeah. And guys, if you haven't seen Hannah XXX Hannah, I have, and you should because they're really good. Really, really good.
Yeah.
My inspo. Okay, so GoGo Studio is an amazing accomplishment, by the way. Your grand opening. It was just such an intentional space, and you can tell that you're super passionate about what you do, which is also why we love bringing you on, because the fashion historian episode that we did with you was just so informative. I think that was our guest episode that Hannah and I knew the least about going into, and we walked away with new knowledge. So I'm excited to do that today too. For those of you that haven't listened to that episode, we really get into the politics of fashion throughout history, and especially for like garments that are, you know, associated with the bedroom, or like we talked about corseting, we talked about vibrators and sex toys, and it's a really cool episode. So you should go back and listen to that. Today, we are getting into what, Hannah Meyer?
Today, we are getting into something that Amanda and I also don't know that much about, but we've heard about the Janes, okay? Because it's sad that we don't know about this because we live in Chicago and this is very significant Chicago history that we should know, especially as the Pelvic Freak Show podcast. So I think last time Hannah was on, we talked about the Janes a tad, or maybe we were talking about it after the podcast and we were like, we need to do another episode of you teaching us about the Janes. There's a documentary out on HBO about it, but I haven't seen it yet. I think it came out in like 2022 or 2020 or something like that.
Yeah, 2022. I would highly recommend it if what I'm saying is interesting to you. The visuals that are added into the documentary and the actual footage and photos of the women is really interesting and cool to see, especially from a fashion perspective. Seeing what everyone was wearing is a lot of fun.
Yeah, so this is going to be a different type of episode because Hannah's going to kind of give us a little history lesson, a little storytelling episode. So we are super excited because we really don't know much about what you're going to tell us. And I'm sure we're going to
I love story
get hyped
time.
about it.
Story time, story time.
I'm so excited. This topic is really important to me and really special to me, and it's really fun. And really, I feel really proud that it happened in our city because I think Chicago is a city that has a really passionate people, and we're really passionate about the city and making the city better, and we have a long history of that, and I think this is just one example of that. And it's the documentary is especially cool, seeing streets and neighborhoods that you might be familiar with as you're kind of learning about this big moment in history.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even without hearing the background yet. Like the fact that we're getting into reproductive rights history in Chicago, especially today with how frequently these rights are being attacked or questioned or brought up, and they're also still progressing in some states. Like the United States has so many different things going on all at once. I'm so curious how like this history lesson will tie into how progressive Illinois is as a whole when it comes to reproductive rights, fertility, like benefits that people have in this state that they don't have in other states. There's just so many things we have in Illinois, and I'm so excited to learn more about our history with the Janes.
Yeah. Before we even talk about the Janes, can you tell us a little bit about what got you interested in history, in fashion history? Like what brought you to this realm? Tell us a little bit about you specifically. We've touched on this in the last episode, but for those who haven't gotten the chance to meet you.
I'm just like a history nerd, and I always kind of have been. It was my favorite subject as a kid, but it wasn't like school history where you're just memorizing dates and names and presidents and whatever. Like I loved historical fiction, and I loved getting to think about what it would be like to live in different eras. And then I also loved fashion. I watched Project Runway like religiously as a child. I got to see Tim Gunn speak in person, and I actually cried seeing him. Like it was one of the coolest things. And so when I got into college and was working retail and like secondhand retail, I kind of realized that those two things could mesh together, and I could learn about history through the lens of fashion. And I just dove in headfirst. I absolutely love it. I think fashion touches everything because whatever is going on in the world, people are wearing clothes while it happens, and that's saying something. And it's a form of art that we all participate in because, you know, for the most part, we all get dressed every single day. And, you know, everything that we wear has a story and a context and a reason that we're wearing it. You know, I could do the like Devil Wears Prada, Miranda Priestley cerulean speech, but like the historical context version of the cerulean speech, like, you know, the reason we wear denim has a history, the reason that, you know, we have graphic tees and things that speak to our political beliefs has a context and a history. So all of that is what is really fascinating to me. And learning that I could marriage that through vintage, and then also I think then go on to help people discover their own personal style from a context of like, what does this mean? What do you want to say about yourself? What makes you feel good? Yeah, I feel like that all kind of ties together and
yeah, dude.
Gets me excited.
Exciting. And yeah, Hannah does personal style boxes too. For Christmas this past year, I got Austin, who's my boyfriend, a style box from Hannah, and it like changed his fashion game. He was obsessed with it. And then I told one of my friends about it who listens to this podcast too. So if you know who you are, she reached out to Hannah and did a style box for her boyfriend too. And Hannah was like, should I just become a boyfriend stylist?
I'm carving out a niche as a boyfriend stylist, and I'm not mad about it. I will help your man look better if you need a little assistance.
I sent her a Pinterest board, and it was like, every aspect of the Pinterest board, it was like, yes. Like it was perfect.
I was your first style bundle person too?
You were like kind of the inspiration for the idea. Like I was already kind of toying with like, how do I get into styling more? And then you were like, style me. And absolutely. Thank you for trusting me.
I think it's such a good option for people that have ever been like, oh, I wish I just had a personal stylist, like have trouble finding their niche within the fashion world and are just so used to just like, you know, going on like White Fox, Zara, like fast fashion type brands, and then just throwing clothes away. It truly, Hannah picks out pieces that you will keep in your closet and use, which is more sustainable and how we should all be living.
Oh, thanks.
It's a scary world out there.
Absolutely.
It really is. But speaking of fashion, everyone look at Hannah's shirt. Not me, Hannah, the other Hannah.
Hey.
Call Jane.
So a lot of people might not even know who the Janes are. I'm realizing that now. We've been saying the Janes and like, we haven't touched at all what they are. Can you give us like how do we want to start this story? Do you want to go ahead and jump in? Do you want to tell us like even who the Janes are briefly, and then we'll kind of start from the beginning?
I guess I'll start with, this is reproductive justice, abortion care in the city of Chicago at a time when it was not legal, before Roe v. Wade came into effect, and in the years kind of leading up to Roe v. Wade. So we're in the mid 60s, but this This is a group of women who were providing safe, illegal, but safe abortions to women in the city who needed it. And they were breaking the law, and they were putting themselves at risk. The women entrusting themselves in their care were at risk, but they were doing it in a safe way, which, as we'll kind of talk about, was not the norm at a time when it was illegal across the U.S. For the most part. So
let's fast forward, rewind back to 1960s. Okay, so what even did abortion access look like in 1960s? Can you take us there?
Do you mind if we go back a little further first for some context?
I'm so down to go back further.
Okay. I want to start with I feel like y'all have probably mentioned this or talked about this on the pod before. Like, for most of human history, reproductive care was done by women for women. It was like an intergenerational thing. It was through like doulas and midwives and that kind of a thing. It's only in very recent history is it something that has been streamlined through the medical field, which there are good things about, and there are also a lot of negatives, as y'all talk about regularly, the ways in which women's healthcare has been, stigmatized and ignored and been underfunded and all of that. So for most of human history, women were performing reproductive care and, care through birth, through all of that for each other. There was a lot of really knowledgeable and experienced women who would pass that knowledge down. And it was something that, for the most part, if you were a woman, you participated in to some degree, helping, other women in the community give birth, helping them through miscarriages, etc. It wasn't until the mid-1800s that the American Medical Association was born, of pretty much only male physicians, and kind of started to streamline and legitimize medicine in a way that it hadn't been before. And again, there are good things about that, but one thing it did was stigmatize careers like being a midwife, being a doula, those things that were like women run. Suddenly the AMA decided there needed to be kind of a male authority figure on. And what it did was take reproductive care into a very sterile medical setting, and out of homes, out of the hands of women in a lot of ways. And what that also did was put this male authority figure in charge of things like abortion. And they wanted laws around it, and they wanted restrictions, and they wanted to be the ones in charge of it. And so from 1870s until Roe v. Wade, abortion is largely illegal. All states put some kind of law restricting abortion, making it a crime, into effect. And this pushes abortion care underground. And it also creates this entire kind of market of illegal and unsafe abortion too, and people taking advantage of women who feel desperate, who feel afraid, who don't want to be pregnant, who maybe didn't even want to have sex in the first place, who were, assaulted, raped, etc. Women are still, at this point, at the turn of the century, very much reliant on men. And so pregnancy could make or break whether you were able to get married, whether you were able to stay married. There was a lot of...
Wait, what do you mean by that?
It was at a time when, if you were in a relationship that was not safe, or if there were, if you were married and maybe having an affair, or if you were married and your husband and you didn't feel like you could afford to take care of another kid and you got pregnant, like there was just a lot of situations in which that could create unsafety for the woman, or create a situation where maybe the child wasn't safe or things like that. Or, there are a number of ways that children can have birth defects from different chemicals and stuff at play in these times before we knew about a lot of that. There's complications with pregnancies happening that now are being put into the hands of a lot of male physicians just didn't have experience with reproductive care. And so a lot of pregnancies that had complications probably could have, there are things that could have been prevented. There are women's lives who maybe didn't need to be lost. And so, there's this kind of underground market for abortions that is taking advantage of these women who feel desperate for whatever reason. Thousands of women are dying each year from this. It is a record that is kept. And in Chicago, Cook County Hospital has a septic abortion wing. They have a wing of the hospital that is for women who have received abortion care illegally. For some reason, it didn't go well. There's some kind of infection. There's too much bleeding, and they end up in the hospital. In the documentary, they interview a man who, like a doctor who did a round on this floor of the hospital, and he was like, at least once a week we were calling the morgue because someone had passed away in this wing. So it's serious and it's scary, and the success rate is not what it should be because a lot of people who aren't medical professionals are doing this to take advantage of women and take their money. So yeah, I want to give that context because it's scary and it's serious. And it's not really until kind of the 50s that Planned Parenthood starts, that there's conferences beginning to happen about abortion reform and legalization. There's an instance where there's a chemical, it's not a chemical, it's a pill, it's a medication that you can be prescribed. Excuse my pronunciation if this is wrong. In the 60s, thalidomide, a drug is supposed to alleviate some pregnancy symptoms. I think probably some discomfort with pregnancy. What it also does is cause severe birth defects for women who were taking it. Their children are coming out with birth defects. And there is a popular TV host at the time who takes this prescription, is worried about her child being born with birth defects, is seeing that is likely to happen. And she takes cameras with her as she travels to Europe in order to have an abortion so that she doesn't have to have these complications with her pregnancy. And that is kind of the first publicized, like, very popular news story about how the current laws about abortion in the US are complicating pregnancies for women in a way that's unsafe. And that is something that kind of turns the tide of abortion opinion in the US too. There's also a series of doctors in California who get sued for giving abortions to women who are exposed to rubella, which is also supposed to cause birth defects. And then there's this whole kind of medical field across the country that rallies around these doctors. So there's all these cases kind of happening and getting more publicity about why there should maybe start to be some reform and some change. And so that was a long-winded way of giving context, but I think it's important to kind of understand the 60s is now this time that's ripe for change, not just with women's healthcare and women's rights, but it's also the civil rights movement happening. The Black Panther Party has started. Anti-war sentiments are really high against the Vietnam War. It's this time of political uprising and rebellion in the US in a way that's really unique to this period. And so I think, of course, that women's rights and women's healthcare was also a conversation at this point.
Okay, so I'm backing up a little bit because I'm so curious about this ward that was specific for septic abortion reactions. Is there any more context on where those abortions were coming from? Was it, because obviously this is pre-Janes, so are these just average Joes learning how to do this at home and charging women, and it's kind of like a back alley abortion, or were they medical providers? Or
I think it's a number of things. One thing that I know for certain is that the mob in Chicago was providing abortions.
I was just going to ask, like, what else in Chicago was going on? It was the mafia, right? Chicago mafia.
Yeah, all sorts of gangs and mobs are very active at this point. They're very involved in politics. They're, involved with the police forces as well. They're kind of running the city. One thing they are doing is offering abortions. There's the documentary opens with a woman telling a story about getting one from the mob. There's no context given, she is not talked through it. She is told to go to a motel room. They don't speak to her at all. They just tell her to lie down on a table. They do it. And then they leave her in the motel room bleeding.
Wow.
So that's the situation. If you want an abortion, you know a friend of a friend or someone probably connected to the mob who can give that to you. But, this woman obviously survived. She's telling her story however many years later. But, there are a lot of women who did not survive that. And then there are a lot of desperate women trying different things on themselves, too. There's all sorts of different treatments that are supposed to work, like women are pouring acid on their genitals. Yeah, I'm sure the term coat hanger abortion is a thing for a reason, as scary and horrible as that is. So there's women trying stuff on themselves. There's women entrusting men with no medical experience who might call themselves doctors, who might say they are, but there's, you don't have any way to vet that information. They're paying, hundreds of dollars at the time, which, is even more today. And then also these men are taking advantage of these women. There's talk of like, also needing sexual favors in order to follow through with abortion.
Right.
So that's what the situation is. And also birth control is in its very beginnings, and you needed to be married in order to access it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I actually did not know that.
Women would buy wedding rings from department stores and put them on and go to doctors and pretend that they were married. So there were ways in which you could get it. But the law was that you needed to be married in order to access it.
That would be me for show.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'd find a way.
This was pre-women owning their own bank accounts if they were unwed. So this is, that's not surprising. It's horrifying, but
this is super important to paint this picture. I think you did it really well.
Yeah,
to understand exactly what was going on at this time in Chicago in 1960s and how we got to this place, because it kind of shows, and I'm sure you'll tell me like why the Janes came about or how the Janes came about specifically in Chicago at this time, but it seems like this is leading to that.
Yeah. And it's also, sex education is not really something that any young person has access to, male or female. And also like things like condoms, diaphragms, all of that kind of like reproductive healthcare, family planning stuff is not readily available either. Women in the documentary talk about like knowing that it exists, but not knowing how to get it or even how to use it. So on top of not having reproductive care, there's also not even the like sex education element of like, how do you prevent even getting pregnant in the first place? So we're really just at a loss. If you were like a young person at that time, especially a young woman, you might not even know like what part of your cycle like you could get pregnant during, and so then that happens and your only choice is to entrust yourself into the care of someone in the mob who is there for the money and doesn't actually care if you live or die.
Yeah, dude. And think about today, what we know about our bodies. It's still very limited. So then let's fast forward. Let's rewind. I keep saying fast forward.
You like going into the future.
Yeah, baby. Let's rewind to this time. I can't even imagine. We did that whole episode on what sex ed didn't teach us or something. I forget the exact title, but I think it was around like this time last year that we filmed that.
Yeah. Well, and sex ed is such an interesting one because the Reagan administration also shifted everything for that. So we're still seeing trickle down from like a really limiting time for sex education that was driven by this right-wing conservative mindset. So we're talking even pre that and the impact that had and what we're seeing today from that. But even today, we have all these issues with sex ed. So yeah, we're going back, what is that, 60 years now? Crazy.
Yeah, there's this, I'll bring out my cool prop that I want to show.
Oh yeah.
Which 60 years is like pretty recent in my mind. You know what I mean?
That's like when probably our parents were born.
Yeah.
My mom was born.
My mom was, 1967.
Mine's
So
68.
scarily close. Yeah.
Yeah, our grandparents are probably around our age at that time. Like, but I wanted to share, I brought this prop, which, won't matter unless you're watching the video. But one of the anecdotes in the documentary is this woman's talking about being in high school and taking one of her friends to get an abortion with the Janes, which we'll get into what that looks like. But she said while she's waiting for her friend to get the abortion, on the table in this waiting room is this book that I have in my hands. And she was like, I started reading through that. This was more sex education reading this book while her friend was getting an abortion than she had in the entirety of her adolescence. And this book is called Our Body, Ourselves, a book by and for women. It was published in the 70s, and it's like a revolutionary book about sex education and pleasure and like how to take care of your genitalia as a woman and like all the cleanliness and all of that kind of stuff. It's like, what's the American Girl book?
The Care and Keeping of You.
It's that book, but for women in the 70s.
Oh my God, I had that book.
Boy, did I read that book in 5th grade. This one's, what's interesting is this is probably so much more comprehensive.
Yes, I would imagine so. There's literally the first page I open up to says lesbian mothers. It's got queer history in here too.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's got STI information in here and what the symptoms are for men and women. It's so comprehensive. And shout out to Karen Falvey, Spring of 74, because her name is in the inside.
Oh my
cover.
God, that's cute. Where did you get that book? Did you just find it?
I thrifted it and was just like, oh, this is a 70s book. This looks kind of interesting. And then I started reading it and I was like, this is actually a really cool piece of history. And then in the documentary, they mention having it. And I was like, okay, I can never give this up.
That's also
the coolest thing.
I've been looking for a coffee table book.
Literally, I can't imagine getting rid of this because it's so freaking cool. Like if you're into vintage books alone, it's really cool looking. And then you can tell just by looking at this, if you're watching the video, this book is going to be good. A book by and for women.
Yeah.
That's what I want to read.
And especially seeing that in the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it still feels revolutionary now. Like I can't imagine.
Yes.
Yeah, I love the doodles on this too.
Well, and this is cool because we're not talking about presidents today. We're talking about the Janes, but obviously, like we have different administrations and things. There was a time pre-Reagan where sex ed was actually progressing more, and then it was set back in the 80s. So I think like this coming in the 70s is a testament to, oh, we might have been getting somewhere actually in terms of sex ed. And now we're stuck with the care and keeping of you because we're trickling down from the Reagan administration.
Yeah.
So that's super interesting.
Important note. I liked that.
Yeah, that was a lot of context. We can get into the actual story now, but
I told Hannah, I'm like, this will be like an hour, right? One day we haven't even started talking about the Janes yet.
All right. Okay, so you painted us the picture. Tell us where this began, because I literally know nothing. I don't know if this was one person, if this was a group of people that were like, what the fuck is going on? We need to do something about this. Like, what happened to prompt the group, the Janes?
yeah, so we're in the late 60s in Chicago, 67, 68. The mayor is Mayor Richard J. Daley, the first of the Daleys to be mayor. He is mayor from 55 until 70-something. He's mayor for 20 years, and he only stops being mayor because he dies. He was Irish Catholic, a Democrat, but on the more conservative side, and very interested in growing Chicago economically in some ways which were good, but primarily good for wealthy and white people specifically. He's also known for being someone who perpetuated the segregation that was already present in the city. So that's going on. This is the time, again, civil rights movement is happening. Martin Luther King has been to Chicago recently. He has then been assassinated. There are riots in Chicago that happen after he is assassinated. Daley handles that very poorly and sends thousands of cops into the south and west sides where these demonstrations are taking place. He is quoted as saying, "Shoot and kill anyone who is looting or starting fires." Not great. There are the Puerto Rican riots happening at the same time. The Puerto Rican communities are upset at how they are being treated and redlined into specific areas of the city, how those areas are underfunded. There is the Black Panther Party being founded by Fred Hampton. There are anti-war demonstrations happening when the Democratic National Convention is here in 68, in the late 60s. So yeah, in the same way there is political uprising everywhere in the US, Chicago is a microcosm of that, is a perfect example of all of these movements happening at the same time. And our founder of the Janes, Heather Booth, is a part of these groups. She's part of the civil rights movement. She spends the summer of 64 in Mississippi, the Freedom Summer of 64 in Mississippi, getting people registered to vote. Part of the civil rights movement. She is learning from these organizers, from these Black and brown students and youth who are leading these movements. And she takes that knowledge back to the city. She's a grad student at U Chicago. And she is beginning to interact with other women who are students who are experiencing unwanted pregnancies, experiencing assault, not getting the care that they need. And she is already a community organizer. And so she sees this problem and is trying to think of a way that her involvement in these other organizations and movement spaces can address this problem of women's healthcare and the lack of women's healthcare that she is seeing. And so what she does is she asks kind of the medical segment of the civil rights movement if any of them know a doctor who might be willing to perform abortions. And they point her to Dr. T.R.M. Howard. He's a Black activist and a surgeon. He's originally from the South and was a big advocate when Emmett Till died. He was someone who was very outspoken about that, and he got put on the Klan's death list and had to leave the South and move to Chicago. So he opens up a surgical practice here, and they interact, and he allows her to start sending women who are in need of abortion to his facility, very, under wraps, to receive safe abortions. Initially, this is how the Janes begins. Whenever women come to her in need of this service, it becomes, she gets a reputation for being someone who can help with this. She will call up Dr. Howard, and he will organize and provide this service. But eventually she can't reach him anymore. She doesn't initially know why. They only communicate via this phone number. She can't get to it. It turns out it's because he was actually arrested for this.
Wow.
So she can no longer use Dr. Howard, and she needs to find someone else who can provide this. And she's also juggling a lot of things. She's a grad student. She's in all of these community organizing spaces. She has a full-time job. She's married. She's thinking about having kids. She's like, the amount of women coming to me is growing constantly because, again, we know that there are a lot of services that are not safe happening. So she is potentially one of the only safe services available. And so the amount of women is growing that are contacting her. She's like, I can't juggle this anymore on my own. And so she starts going to other organizing spaces and meetings. And at the end of it, she'll say, if you're interested in women's healthcare rights, please come talk to me. And so she gets women from all these other movement spaces to start working with her. And a lot of these women are already feeling kind of disenfranchised from these movements because they're very male dominated, and leadership is predominantly male. And a lot of them are preventing women from holding leadership positions. The anti-war movement is very male centered. The civil rights movement in some ways is very male centered. And so they're all kind of feeling a little disillusioned. And so the idea of being leaders in a women's space is really interesting to them, and really appealing. So she starts gathering a group of women from all these different spaces, and they start trying to kind of streamline this process. She's sharing her strategies. She's sharing her connections to, she's trying to find other doctors and surgeons. She's trying to find other people who will provide this service. And some of it is hit or miss. Some of it, she might use someone a couple times and then can't reach them. But she's sharing this strategy with this larger network of women. And again, it starts kind of more informal. She's just like, hey, here are the numbers I use. If you have women reaching out to you who might need this, these are the people I contact. Here's kind of how the steps I take in order to keep it a little bit safer, to keep us away from, they know that this is a crime. It's not a secret. How do we kind of continue to keep it underground, but also provide care for these people?
Yeah. So they're being very careful.
Yes.
So painting the picture, we have Heather Booth comes in contact with Dr. Howard, and they kind of initially start this, and they're doing this illegally, of course. And then Dr. Howard arrested, and then she's reaching out to other people and then finding other doctors. Do we know what happened to Dr. Howard?
I should know what happens to him from there. I don't know after his arrest how long that arrest is for. I don't know what happens to him after that.
But I'm sure being in contact with him from there, not safe if we're wanting to keep this going.
Correct. And, it's the 60s and 70s. So if you don't have a phone number to reach someone, you might just not know.
No, that's so fair. I'm not going to look him up on Facebook. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Also, shout out Dr. Howard, because I'm sure when he got arrested, he was offered some sort of deal for providing information and for him to protect this, because it was that important. It just seems like a really cool person. So
yeah, he's a really important mover and shaker in the civil rights movement, on top of then providing this service for women.
Also as a medical professional, and just, your license is at stake, and you're deciding this is more important and this is necessary care. It's really freaking cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Link us back in.
All right. So at this point, things are still like, becoming more organized. There's a bigger circulation of women kind of in this group. It's still pretty informal, but this is where it starts to get more structure. And what that looks like, if you were a member of this organization at the time, they establish a phone line, a singular phone, and it is just one of the members, Eleanor. It's her home phone line. She's married, she has children, and they just decide to use her phone, but she doesn't want people knowing her name or the name of her family.
Yeah.
So they come up with this kind of fake person who might live with them named Jane. And so they start running ads in newspapers, putting things on bulletin boards around college campuses, that sort of thing. And it just says, pregnant, worried, pregnant, need help, call Jane.
Nice.
And so they have people calling her home phone line. And if they ask for Jane, which, potentially there's a Jane that lives there, it's pretty like kind of plausible deniability.
Yeah.
You call this phone number and you ask for Jane, and their messaging, answering machine even says, this is the home of the so-and-sos and Jane, please leave your message. And so any woman calling that needs help is just calling, asking for Jane, asking to make a meeting with Jane.
Why do I have chills right now?
Yeah. No, because you think about how much liability and risk this person on her home line has put herself in, especially for an answering machine to say that. All it takes is one officer to call and be like, okay, Jane's phone number is like at this family home. We can go see what's up and see what they're doing here.
Yeah. And I'm just imagining because, you have multiple people now, multiple people getting phone calls, I'm assuming. And you're like, okay, we have these doctors. You can reach out here. And then Eleanor's like, we're bringing it into one line. Eleanor takes the reins.
Yeah. So they establish themselves as this group, but quite soon after that, very informally, they become known as the Janes, because this is the number, you're calling this number, you're asking for Jane. And they say that it's like, oh, no one's called Jane anymore. So it's a name that like none of us had. But then they all become Janes. All of them are Jane, because they're all, what happens after it becomes kind of more streamlined is everyone's calling for Jane. Eleanor, whoever's answering the phone, a lot of women would like stay at her house to take messages too. They're writing, every woman who calls gets an index card with her name on it, with a phone number to reach her, any information about her pregnancy, how far along she is, symptoms, complications, how old she is. And then they call back with a date and a time for her to meet with the Janes. And so at each Jane meeting, they have a stack of index cards and they're handing them out to all of the members, and you're assigned any number of women. I think they kind of say 10 at the most per week that you are in charge of contacting and setting up a time to meet with her to start scheduling her abortion care. So if you're a member of the Janes, you're coming to a meeting once a week, being handed a stack of index cards with the names of women. It's cool in the documentary, some of the women who were Janes still have these index cards with names on them, with, and things in parentheses. It might be like very scared, dad is a cop, like things like that to watch out for.
Notes.
Yeah. Be careful of husband. Don't, like, if he calls, hang up, like, or if he answers when you call, hang up.
Yeah.
So there's all these kind of personal notes as well. And then from there, I think they say they do maybe 30 abortions a week and 3 days a week. So they're organizing a lot of women every week, and they are not staying in the same place for too long. You can't establish a single place to do this. So what they have is, when they call a woman to organize a date and time, they have a place called the front. And the front is like a waiting room. The woman, they'll give that address to the woman. They'll say, meet at this time. You can bring someone, kids, spouse, friend, whoever you need for support can come to the front with you. This is the address. And they set it up like a waiting room. There'll be snacks. There'll be, Jane's there kind of as a support system, as comfort. And then at some point, a Jane will drive up to the front and take this patient to the place. And the place is where the abortion actually happens. And it's usually in someone's apartment. And they're asking other Jane members friends, family members, associates of the Janes to use their apartment for a single day to perform abortions, and then they're out. And they, circulate through all of these people's homes and different spaces. Every single day that they do this is different.
So smart to mix it up.
So yeah, you might be assigned as a Jane to drive for a day, and you're in, again, they're changing cars too. So you'll be assigned a random car. You'll take people from the front, the waiting room, to the place and then back. And while you're driving, you're probably taking kind of a roundabout way on side streets just in case you're being followed. And then you're driving people back to the front where they will then leave. They can stay as long as they need to kind of gather themselves, receive any kind of assurance or aftercare from the Janes, and then they'll go on their way from there. But those locations are changing, cars are changing, your role is going to change. And at this time, they're still using, particularly one man is performing the abortions. And this is the man that they connect with after Dr. Howard. There's differing opinions on whether they knew if he was a doctor or not, but he turns out he was not. He's such a character. He's in the documentary.
Okay.
His name is Mike, in quotations. I don't think that's his actual name.
Okay. Okay, got you.
He learns, he starts in construction. He learns how to do abortions from, he's not really clear. It seems like he probably knew from someone who had mob ties.
Okay.
And he is performing them on his own initially just because he realizes that there is money in it. So a shady character.
Okay.
But also very willing to just yap the entire documentary. Very weird. It's kind of crazy.
I can't wait to psychoanalyze this guy.
But yeah, the women talk about how he's very caring and kind to all of these women receiving abortions. He's incredibly careful and gentle with them. And then it pans to him and he's like, I was just doing my job. They're like, oh, he was so sweet. He was so wonderful. We never had any complaints. And he's like, yeah, I was just kind of in it for the money. It was my job,
Yeah.
It's so crazy because I just can't imagine this man being good at that. But it seems like he really was, and they didn't have any issues with him. The only issue was money was no object for the Janes. There was not a set price. They would ask each individual person, how much can you pay? And they would accept that amount, even if it was $0.
Yeah.
And Heather says this when she is talking about initially working with Mike. She says, we're going to take whatever they can give. It's not going to be a set price. And he's kind of like, well, why would I do that?
Okay.
But he does. He does do it. And I'm sure they're probably subsidizing what they pay him with their own money, with donations.
Yeah,
however
they're
they
figuring
can
it
get
out.
it. But the women receiving care are not paying a set price. It is whatever they can afford.
It sounds like this dude is like, yeah, I just got this job from Indeed.com. I'm just showing up, getting my wages, and I'm bouncing.
Literally.
Doesn't understand this whole idea behind why this is happening.
It's just crazy because the document, this is revolutionary. This is so important history. And it's just they pulled a dude off the street and he's like, that's my 9 to 5.
No, literally. I got to clock in at Culver's.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not ignoring you. I'm fact checking something really quick because the sliding scale was an interesting point because do you know the Chicago Women's Health Center? They're up in Uptown.
Yeah.
So we've done some volunteer physical therapy with them on the weekends, and they were founded by one of the Janes. And
cool.
So it was one of the Janes went on to found the Emma Goldman Clinic, which focused on gynecological care, and then later found the Chicago Women's Health Center in 1975. And they still follow that pricing model to this day. Wow. And I remember when we did our orientation with them, they talked all about their history and how one of the founders was the Janes. And that was actually, I think, the first time we had heard the name the Janes. And we were like, oh, we have to learn more about that. That's incredible. But just to show you the impact of what this group was doing is still alive and well in Chicago to this day.
Absolutely.
It's wild.
That's a cool connection though. Yeah. So they have this random guy seemingly off the street, just kind of doing his job, not understanding, I think, the gravity or like how important what he's doing is for all of these people. But he seems to be like mostly someone who is very careful and gentle and sweet with the women he is caring for. And he even says, he's like, I was very good at what I did. So, but eventually he says that the mob is kind of asking him to start doing this for them. I don't like that. There's some gray area there, but essentially he decides he doesn't want to do this anymore. And he offers to teach the Janes how to do it. Or whether he offers or they ask, he teaches the Janes how to perform abortions. And this is a huge turning point for them because now they get to dictate what the care looks like from start to finish, which they are already doing primarily. But this one thing is being done by a man. And now they have women running from start to finish the entire process, which they talk about how meaningful that is. These are people younger than us. These are women younger than us for the most, like anywhere from early 20s to 30 for the most part, who learn how to perform abortions so that they can give them safely to thousands of women across Chicago. And it's this, like, they talk about what a special feeling that is of like, we are providing this service. We are giving care to other women. One woman says, like, I grew up in the Catholic Church. I grew up getting, you know, abused by nuns in a Catholic school. I didn't think women cared about each other.
Yeah.
And now I'm in this setting, learning how to give this reproductive care to other women, seeing other women like be there and comfort each other and reassure each other through this whole process. Like, I didn't realize women could care about each other this way. Like, that is so cool. That is like, I get goosebumps thinking about how special that experience must have been. And I like also terrifying, also, you know, so serious, and the gravity of it is important, but like, yeah, like I love women. I love women for this.
Yeah,
For real.
The whole time you were like discussing the network and the logistics of it and what it looked like, I'm just like, women are incredible.
So smart.
To not even know that other women have your back and to still create this and create this network that is a well-oiled machine and just persevere through that is incredible. Like, to not even know that women have each other's backs and to still do that.
And how much trust you have to have in the process, because like, this is illegal. This is super scary. Really bad things could happen if this is discovered. And then you're seeing like a sticker that says, call Jane if you need help or something, or it's word of mouth, I'm sure. And the trust that you have to have, like, these people got me, is huge.
Yeah, I think it speaks to, imagine being pregnant and not wanting to be. I think there's a level of desperation of like, I kind of have to trust these people. But then for that experience to be full of like compassion and care and intentionality at every step, you know, they're using surgical tools. They're getting the proper medication. They have all of the things. Like one woman says, the best medical care I ever received was an illegal abortion from the Janes. Like, in her entire life, you know, she's, you know, probably in her 60s or 70s now. And she's like, the best care I ever received was that abortion experience from the Janes from start to finish. I think that is, you know, these were women, like students, wives, mothers with jobs, like putting time and intentionality into making this experience as safe as possible. By the end of their time, I guess we'll get to how this kind of comes to a close. They performed over 11,000 abortions in a matter of years.
What was the span of years that was done in?
I think the start date is a little bit gray, like, because Heather is kind of doing this on her own and referring people for a little bit before it becomes more organized, but like 68, 69 until 73.
I think it's on your shirt.
It is.
Oh, wow.
One thing I want to say is, I feel like I would be so scared that, was there some kind of, maybe you don't know this, process of that they had to screen people that called Janes to make sure they weren't, I mean, were they just full on like, all right, we're just going to trust this person? Like, I'm imagining some spy or something like calling and trying to be like, yeah, like, I'm pregnant, I need an abortion. And then like, you know, trying to go through the process and like ruin this whole thing. That's where my like mind goes of fear.
I'm sure they were doing some amount of vetting, but also there's not a lot you can do, especially like at the tech with the technology available at this time.
It's very
I think a
different.
lot of it is putting trust in the people coming to them too.
Yeah.
They talk about, they literally have a woman who works at a police station who comes to get an abortion, and like on her note card it is like, the number I'm giving you is the number for the police station, like please be careful when you call. If I don't answer and like say my name, like hang up, essentially. And they're like, well, you know, these are also like very radical progressive women who are mostly very anti-cop, so they're like, we're helping a woman who is like, I don't know if she was a cop, but she's working at a police station, and but they do it. So I'm sure there was like a lot of situations that maybe felt sketchy, or but they put trust in the situation and the patients. And I think also, to their benefit, like men in power are probably way underestimating what women were accomplishing here.
No, for real.
And I think that is to their benefit. I think, like, I'm sure police and politicians and people in power knew that there was someone out there performing abortions called Jane.
Yeah.
They were putting advertisements everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they were aware that something like this was happening. They didn't ever really seem to put any energy into trying to figure it out until we'll get to it. But until then, I'm sure they knew and either didn't care or just underestimated the scope and the scale of what was happening. And it is like, there was a subset of the Chicago Police Department specifically meant to monitor social political activists and organizers. So like, I mean, you know, we know what happens to Fred Hampton of the Black Panthers. Like, he's killed in his home by the police. They're like, all those kinds of figures in the different for different like causes all have police assigned to them. And a couple Janes do too from other things. Like a couple women who are prominent in the civil rights movement have like a police tail that follows them around because of that, but they're like still performing stuff for the Janes also. So I'm sure the police were aware and probably underestimating it or not caring to some degree. But that's not to downplay like the severity of the crimes they were committing.
Yeah. I know this must come to an end because we said this ends in 1973. And earlier I mentioned something about the police and you were like, we're going to get there. Take us to how this all comes to a close.
All right. Yeah. So we kind of touched briefly on, do the police know? The answer is probably. But what ends up happening in 1973, two women walk into a Chicago police station and report that their sister-in-law is going to get an abortion and they want the police to step in and stop it. They specifically go to the homicide unit because they consider this murder. And they want the homicide unit to take care of it. In the documentary, if you watch it, the police officers involved in this are interviewed, and they're kind of like very nonchalant about it all. They're kind of just like, we're just doing our job, as they shrug, which is, again, crazy. But they agree to follow these women and their sister-in-law to the place of this abortion, wherever it is. Obviously, at this point, they don't know what that looks like. But they agreed to this situation.
Sister-in-law is crazy.
Yeah. So these women escort their sister-in-law to the front, wherever that is that day, the waiting room of the Jane's abortion process. And they get in a Jane car, and the police follow this car from the front to the place where abortions are being performed. In this case, that's in the South Shore neighborhood of Chicago, in an apartment building on a high floor. And so the police follow them to this apartment building, take up the next elevator after they watch which floor it gets off at. It's like one of the old buildings where you kind of see the dial like go up and point to a floor, so they can see which floor these women get off at. They take the elevator up, and as they're getting out of the elevator, they see women approaching them, and they stop these women and say, "Did you just get an abortion?" And this is, you know, some vulnerable woman who did just get an abortion, and she starts crying and she says yes.
Yeah, imagine you're in that situation.
Right. I don't blame this woman at all. You know, that's not something you're prepared for. These men are not dressed in cop uniform. They look more like detectives, you know, like the trench coat, all black suit. It's the 60s. They probably got like a little fedora on or something, like intimidating group of large men come off an elevator, grab your arm and say, "Did you get an abortion?"
Yeah. And you're probably so nervous this entire time that you're going to be found out. Like you're nervous about this process, like we talked about with like trusting these people.
Yeah.
So that is scary.
Yeah. So this woman says yes. She shows them the apartment. They enter the apartment and immediately begin looking for a man who is performing abortions. They're looking for a male doctor who is running this whole operation, and they obviously don't find it. To the point where they are like looking out of windows, seeing if a man is on a balcony, hanging out of a window by his fingertips. I don't even know. They are like so set on finding a man in this situation. They cannot comprehend that this is fully run by women.
There must be a man around here
Where's
somewhere.
the man in charge? Not, mind you, they probably passed women like holding surgical tools.
Yes.
And they're like, "Where's the man? Balcony.
Where is your leader?"
Yeah, and the women in there say they like remain very calm. They say like the actual bedroom where they're performing the service, they like locked that door initially just to like get the woman who was receiving care in there like in a more presentable state. They're like taking care and being as cooperative. I mean, these are all women who are very anti-cop, which is wonderful to see. But they are like, being compliant for the most part. And yeah, these police officers are shocked that women are doing all of this by themselves, but they do arrest all of the Janes present as well as the women receiving care. And then they go back to the front to the waiting room area, wherever that was, and arrest the women there. In total, 7 Janes are arrested. A few women who received care those women are just interrogated and released. The Janes are held. And then the trial begins and kind of all of the legal stuff from there is going on. One of the Janes, her husband is a lawyer, so he kind of initially gives them guidance, and they interview a bunch of different men who are lawyers wanting to represent them. They like kind of talk about what a negative experience that was, how none of these male lawyers are really kind of understanding of their case in the way that they want them to be. And they land on this one woman, Joanne Wolfson, to take their case. And she initially doesn't want to do it, which I think is important because she ends up being this rock star, but is initially like, "I don't really want to take up this cause."
Interesting.
But she is a very well-known lawyer. I think she also represents the Black Panthers on different occasions. So she's someone taking up progressive causes, but isn't sure about this one in particular. But she takes up their case. She's not trying to make it this big political statement. She just wants them to get off. And what she realizes is that she is aware that Roe v. Wade is making its way through the courts at the exact same time. So her strategy becomes to prolong this as long as possible on the chance that Roe v. Wade comes into effect, because at that point, whatever the Janes did that was illegal would be dismissed. So
So smart.
her whole thing is she just does all of these really kind of like run-of-the-mill extensions and like, I don't know lawyer talk, so I apologize if I'm not using the right words, but like all these kinds of like, different hearings, different motions and things to kind of make this as long of a case as possible to minimize potential time these women could actually spend in jail. Total, each woman is given, I think it's 10 or 11 counts of conspiracy to commit abortion and like all these other things. It ends up being like each woman would be sentenced to over 100 years. So like
Whoa.
life in prison for each of them, essentially.
Whoa.
So Joanne Wolfson is just prolonging this case as much as possible in order to hopefully wait for Roe v. Wade.
Wow.
And we all know the history. That is what ends up happening.
Wow.
I have freaking chills, dude.
That's fucking crazy.
So yeah, all of these women, all the charges end up being dismissed because Roe v. Wade goes into effect. And
all charges
all
dismissed.
charges dropped, yeah.
Wow.
Hell yeah. But still, that's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a year or so long, a year plus process of like trials and hearings. And, I can't imagine like how stressful and, like demanding all of that must have been. And it is publicized around Chicago. I don't know. It doesn't seem to have been something that made national news as much as I like would expect, as much as it seems like important to us now. But yeah, eventually all charges are dropped. Roe v. Wade happens. Abortion becomes legal for, what is it, for the first trimester, for the first 3 months, I think, it becomes legal. And then states can kind of decide what laws look like beyond that. But yeah.
Wow. Thank goodness they found that attorney.
Yeah.
That's so smart.
Knew what to do. Wait it out. That's crazy to think about. Wow. I didn't know that's how it, I mean, I didn't know any of this before today. This is the coolest history lesson I've gone.
I did expect it to end some way of which like legal stuff was involved because it seems like these badass women weren't going to stop.
What's crazy is that while they are being arrested, while they are on trial, the Janes, like headquarters, the women who didn't get arrested that day, are still receiving calls from women asking for care. Despite this like becoming publicized in Chicago, like women arrested for conspiracy, for like abortion conspiracy, etc. People are seeing that Janes are getting arrested and women are still like, it almost like publicizes them more. They're seeing women getting arrested and still like, I still need this service. I'm still going to call the Janes.
That's how desperate you are for it.
Yeah. And they continue to provide it even while this is going on. They have to change their kind of methodology quite a bit.
Whoa,
but
I didn't know that.
They still provide it for some time after this, after the arrests occur.
I say this about a lot of things, but Chicago just really is that girl sometimes.
Yeah.
For like, oh, like underground movements, just grassroots shit. Like we're just such a good city.
I love
that.
this city.
It's so cool. Our history is so cool. Because like you said, like this was not, I mean, I didn't know about this being from here. I guarantee not a single person I like went to school with in LA is aware of who the Janes are. This, like, we're not a city where people talk about our history across the country as much for everything, I guess, like outside of the fire. But like, it's wild that this was here. That's so freaking cool. Good for them. And I'm sure like they were getting so much traction because also like hope was in the air around the time of Roe v. Wade, I guess countrywide. Like people were probably thinking like, oh, this is going to be a thing soon we'll have more access to. You know, people are starting to talk about this more and more, right? So I'm sure there's just naturally more people finding out about them too and trying to utilize their services.
Yeah, absolutely. And the documentary ends, and this is like, they don't dive into this as much, but it does end with this kind of like all of these women being like, we really thought things were going to change. Like what could have been this like very triumphant end to a story of like, and now look where we are. It's not that. It's kind of somber because of the Dobbs decision, because of where we are now in that, like we've taken steps backward. And the women allude to that in the documentary of this kind of like more melancholy end of like what we did made a difference, but not for very long.
What year was the documentary filmed in?
2022.
It's the same year Roe v. Wade was overturned.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Okay, that kind of makes sense then.
I think it was probably, I'm sure they like went back
as a
maybe and
result,
and kind of, I don't know. They seem to already be alluding to it in the documentary. I don't know when they filmed and how much they knew at the time. Maybe it hadn't been fully overturned. Maybe they just knew it was going through the courts, but there's definitely kind of that like attitude of like, we thought things were going to change. And
well, the second the Supreme Court appointee at the end of the first Trump administration, Amy Coney Barrett, was in there. We knew that Roe v. Wade was on the table.
Yeah.
So that was 2019. Or sorry, 2020. I'm getting my years mixed up.
A lot of years today.
A lot of years.
Yeah, so I'm sure it was just already in discussion, the fear of it getting overturned. And then just so happens that this comes out the same year that Roe v. Wade. I still remember where it was when I found out that Roe v. Wade was overturned.
yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm sure this was in response to kind of knowing that this history and this moment that they worked for was about to change. Because I think it's the same year, there's also like a dramatic like film version of the Jane story with Sigourney Weaver, like with a couple big actors. I haven't seen it. I don't want to, I can't comment on if it's good or not, but It's called Call Jane, and then the documentary is The Janes. But
Interesting.
I was gonna say while you were telling this story, like obviously there's like a lot of my mind immediately goes to Handmaid's Tale when I think about like the women in that show and how they help each other get out of Gilead and like this underground network that they're creating. And I'm like, I would sit and watch a series about the Janes that was dramatized and based in history. And then no one can look at that and say like, that's not real. It's just TV. Like this shit happened. This shit is real. And that would just be like so cool to see too.
yeah. And it's like all of the people who lived this and experienced this, like for the most part are still alive. Like it's such a recent history. And it's cool to see these women now retelling their experience as being a part of this. And then like, you know, they're showing that side by side with photos of them at like 20, 25, 30. And it's just cool to see like, you know, how people age and grow and all of that. But like, it's just, they're our grandma's age, you know, that like could have been our family members. It could have been our mothers and our grandmas. And yeah.
And that just goes to show how recent this history is. Like when you think about when Roe v. Wade happened, like that was not that long ago. Like my mom was a teenager. That's crazy.
It's scary to think it's been 2 years since it's been overturned.
4 years, right?
Oh, what year is it?
2026.
That's even scarier.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, brutal.
Thank you for coming on and telling us this story.
Yeah, I want to like, I'm trying to think
End
of
on
like
a
a
high
more,
note.
more like positive way to end this. I think just, I like want to look, I hope we never, I mean, I know some places in the country are already back to needing systems like this. And I hope that one, this can be an example of how to organize in that way. I think something I took from it just as a whole was like how involved in community and how like engaged and active everyone, like these are women who are involved in so many different movements and causes and things that matter. And I just like, I want to feel that energy in Chicago again, specifically in this city. I know like we are lucky in that we live in a state where abortion is still legal and there are multiple avenues to access it safely. And, you know, at different, you know, levels of accessibility price wise and all of that. We have so many amazing services here. And we are a state that people are coming to as other states are turning like making it illegal. But I want to see like the energy that I feel like watching that documentary and hearing stories about what it was like to be a young person involved in that kind of thing. I want to feel that energy here again. And I know it exists already. I know there are so many people doing that work. That's why I love the city. That's why I fell in love with the city when I moved here, is because I felt that energy and I just want to see it continue to amplify. And I want it to be, my hope is that it can continue to be a proactive measure before it needs to be fully like defensive and responsive. Like how do we continue to build those systems now so that, you know, as our administration continues to make it harder to be someone of a marginalized identity in this country, that like Chicago is a leader in that like revolution, in that uprising.
Yeah. Well, and it goes to show like administrations will always cycle, right? And there's no perfect administration that exists. And even if you have the lesser of two evils in office, the systems that were in place before that, there's going to be trickle down from that, regardless of who's in office, right? But you have these movements and these communities are the constant. So I agree, like Chicago's already good at it, but it's easy for people to either lose hope, be in like a state of despair, or be in a state of like, things are good right now, we can chill. If they're, you know, coming from a place of privilege or doing things more reactively. So finding that like proactive engagement is, I think a lot of people are coming out of a state of burnout with activism. And there's like, obviously people, you know, community, people need to take their breaks and show up when they can, whatever. But I love that point of like, we want to feel that energy, and it's really just connection, right? At the end of the day, like the more you connect with people face to face in person and really genuinely care about them, the more that's going to happen.
And I think it's important to know the history of your city, and like even more so the history of the neighborhood that you live in and the community you are surrounded by, because like all of that further like ingrains you where you we can't be disconnected. We can't be a people who don't show up for each other. We need like we can create the world we want to see on these like smaller scales, and that can like grow and echo into other parts. I think it can be easy to feel overwhelmed, like you were saying. And the way to make it feel less overwhelming is to start very small. And that's to know the history of your city, to know the history of your neighborhood and the people around you, and to use that to get engaged, to get connected.
Well, it's so easy to disconnect now because we have everything we could possibly ever need on our phones. And to actually, like, I think that's something Hannah and I have realized with this podcast, even because when we started doing it, it was like, yeah, it's cool. We can, you know, travel and do this, this, and this. And right now our focus is like, we love Chicago. We want to create more community here and do like local events here and make sure our guests are people we really want to connect with and have these conversations with. Yeah. And there's just so many different ways you can establish community. So we have ways to distract ourselves, and we also have all the access we've ever had to connecting with people. So it's just everyone's overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I think navigating that is what's hard.
Yeah.
How cool is it that we can all three come together and sit and talk about this and bring it to the Pelvic Freaks?
Hell yeah.
And be safe and like be able to talk about this kind of stuff.
And the freaks know, like, we will never judge you. Like, this is stuff that we care about. We care about this access and this and people having this information, you know?
Yeah. I love women. I love Chicago.
The best.
We love women. We love Chicago. We love the Janes.
And we love the Pelvic Freaks.
I'm seeing a future Jane on our podcast.
Oh my gosh, that would be so cool.
I'm seeing a Jane on our podcast in the future.
That would be really, really cool.
That'd be really cool.
I'm manifesting that for you guys. Janes, if you're out there, if you listen to this, I really hope I did you justice, but you should come on the pod.
I loved this type of history lesson storytelling episode. I want more. I feel like you have so much to teach us. Like so much. Like I this is important because it's foundational for what we can learn so much from the Janes.
How do you feel about being our recurring historian on the podcast?
Please let me come back and talk history all the time.
We'll yap about what we think we should do next.
Absolutely.
This is awesome. Okay, well, before we sign off, Hannah, can you share with the Pelvic Freaks how to find you on Instagram? We talked about Hannah's businesses at the beginning of this episode, so we want you to reach out to her for all of your fashion or fashion historian needs.
I'm that go-go girl on Instagram. Go-go Studio is my website. That's also linked on my Instagram. I would love to style you. I would love for you to come shop my vintage. I will be involved in Chicago's Sustainable Fashion Week in the fall, and I'll be doing a talk on the history of consumption, which I'm really excited about. So if you follow me on Instagram, you can stay tuned for that. And my hope is that the studio space I have can also be like a place to maybe do more talks on fashion history and that kind of thing. So if this was interesting, also give me a follow, because hopefully I can like get around to organizing and hosting more kind of fashion history talks and panels and that kind of thing. So
cool.
And if you have any more suggestions for like pelvic freak history overlaps that you would like us to talk about,
yay, let us know. You guys have been really good at commenting on our episodes, so leave us a comment with what you want to hear Hannah teach us next.
Is there something in your city you want to learn about that we don't know about? Let us know. Cool. All right, let's sign on off. Hannah, if you will do the honors, I would love for you to say bye to our pelvic freaks, if you remember.
Bye, pelvic freak.
Bye, Pelvic Freaks.
Bye, pelvic freaks.